We're very excited to welcome you today to this session that is sponsored by the Diversity Committee of the Bucks County Association of Realtors. Our topic today is It's Not Just Black and White, a conversation about race, human rights, and real estate. And as I said, this is being sponsored by the Diversity Committee of BCAR. And this committee has become a workhorse committee, especially this year with the important discussions that are happening and long overdue. And our committee has really stepped up, and they're planning quite a few events over the next 12 months. So this is just one of many. I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a moment. We're going to have to go through some housekeeping details here. First of all, my name's Pam Croak. I'm the CEO of the Bucks County Association of Realtors. Happy to welcome you here today. We are going to be using the chat function of Zoom to post questions. And for those of you who aren't familiar, if you go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see the word chat, and you can click on that, and you can post a question to everyone if you like. And staff and our speakers and committee chairs are going to be monitoring this. We're going to start by introducing the questions as they're presented. If that gets to be too much, we may end up holding the questions until the end, but we're going to see how it goes by just asking the questions when they're posted. We're asking everyone to please mute your microphone so that all of us can enjoy the presentation. We are recording this event, and it will be sent out with the slide deck after the fact. So those who weren't able to make this can see it, and those who are on it want the slides will have that ability to have the slides. So right now, what I'd like to do is turn the microphone over to Rose Yuan. Rose is our Diversity Committee Chair. She started her career in real estate in 1998 in Cleveland, Ohio. But since 2004, she's been a realtor salesperson with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Fox and Roach in Doylestown. She is a graduate of the Bucks County Association of Realtors Leadership Academy. She's chair of the Diversity Committee, and she's also a member of our board of directors. She is also a member of the Asian Real Estate Association of America and the Philadelphia Metropolitan Board of Realtors. She is most proud to be an RPAC major investor as a Governor's Club member. Outside of BCAR, she is a very active mom of 2 boys and a member of Toastmasters International, and she also serves as president of her Homeowners Association. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Rose.
Thank you very much, Pam. Good afternoon. Happy Human Rights Day. Madam CEO, our speakers, Michelle and Zeke, Lisa, Sivan, and Anne-Marie from BCAR, fellow realtors, and honored guests. Let us get started. I'm very excited and honored to be introducing one of our amazing speakers for today. Michelle Walker is a real estate industry leader and elected official with nearly 20 years of sales, management, training, and community service experience. She is passionate about serving others and leading with diversity and inclusion. Michelle is the broker owner of STL Buy and Sell Realtors, one of St. Louis area's largest independent real estate brokerages. She credits her success to a diversified business model, hard work, and community service. Michelle is a sought-after industry instructor, and her passion is evident in all her courses. Michelle will serve the National Association of Realtors on the 2021 Board of Directors and as our Diversity Committee Chairperson. She is past president of St. Charles Realtor and has been elected to the Francis Howe School District Board of Education since 2016. Michelle is a U.S. Navy veteran. She holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from Columbia College and a master's degree in real estate from Realtor University. Always a fan of learning, she has continued her education by earning a slew of professional designations, including, get this, CRS, CRI, PMN, CIPS, EPRO, SRES, SRS, PSA, and At Home with Diversity. Michelle and her husband, Walter III, have 3 wonderful great children, Mia, Walter IV, and Mason. Do you remember all that? We're going to have a trivia question later on for you. Michelle has been honored by her industry and her community with numerous awards and honors, including, again, pay attention, 2017 Streetscape Magazine, Beyond the Best, 2016 St. Charles Women's Council of Realtors, Member of the Year, 2015 St. Charles Women's Council of Realtors, Entrepreneur of the Year, 2014 St. Charles Realtors, Realtor of the Year, 2013 Missouri Women's Council of Realtors, Excel Award, 2011 St. Charles Women's Council of Realtors, Excel Award, 2012 to 2020 currently, Missouri Realtors Honor Society. Please help me in giving a warm welcome to Michelle Walker.
Thank you. Rose, do I get to introduce Zeke?
No, Darlene will introduce Zeke.
Fabulous. Thank you, Darlene.
Yes.
So shall I go ahead and introduce Mr. Ezekiel Morris? For over 28 years, a lifelong resident of the Chicago area, has been passionate about improving the vibrancy of the city he serves, and has just been installed as the 2021 president-elect of the Illinois Realtors. As a managing broker for Exit Strategy Realty, EMA Management Office, Ezekiel oversees a full-service real estate and property management team. As Realtors, he works to protect the rights of private property owners by recommending and promoting legislation which safeguards and advances the interests of real property owners. Mr. Morris began his real estate career in 1989. He is a member of the Chicago Association of Realtors, where he served as president for the 2012-2013 term and was named its local Realtor of the Year in 2013. The Chicago Association awards Zeke Morris Scholarship, supporting the education efforts of those who have shown a commitment to the stabilization and economic development of underserved Chicago communities. That's a great honor. At the state level, Mr. Morris has been involved in a number of working groups and committees and has chaired the Housing Opportunity Working Group, the Bylaws Committee, the Public Policy and Government Affairs. He's a member involvement group and the State Legislative Contacts Working Group. He has served multiple terms on the Illinois Realtors Board of Directors, has been installed as the 2020 Treasurer of Illinois Realtors, and in 2022, remember, will be the State Association's first African-American president. Mr. Morris understands the power of a strong realtor political advocacy program can have on the industry. He is among an elite group of realtors nationwide who have been introduced into the Realtors Political Action Committee, RPAC, Hall of Fame for lifetime contributions of at least $25,000. At the national level, Mr. Morris has served on the National Association of Realtors, NAR Board of Directors, and has lent his expertise in a variety of committees, including the Housing Opportunity, diversity, federal housing policy, and the multicultural real estate leadership advisory group, an equal opportunity, cultural diversity, real property valuation, land use property rights and environment, and federal financing and housing policy. In 2018, Mr. Morris was chosen to chair NAR's Fair Housing Act Anniversary Implementation Group and spearheaded the National Association's efforts to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, and currently serves on the extended leadership team as the 2020 liaison for community engagement. Mr. Morris earned his bachelor's degree from Upper Iowa University and is a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. He is a member of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago and is involved in the church's housing and economic development ministry. So let's give a round of applause for Mr. Ezekiel Morris, our other speaker. Thank you.
All right. So now do I get to just take it away?
Take it away.
All right. Wow. I'm going to have to remember to send a shortened bio the next time I do one of these. You guys know everything except what we had for breakfast. So
right.
I appreciate all of that. But it's important for you guys to know a little bit about who Zeke and I are. We're both very passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion work within the Realtor organization. And some things to keep in mind is, when we think about diversity, a lot of us, we just think black and white, black, white, brown. It's actually a spectrum. It's a rainbow. Think of it as a rainbow of people with unique qualities. So we're all different. And things that impact one person may not impact somebody else. 2020 has been a year that none of us could have ever predicted. Some days I wish I had had a crystal ball so that I could have been better prepared for what was going to happen in 2020. I think that 2020 has allowed more progress. It's allowed things to move forward in ways that we may have stalled and taken a lot longer to do in the past. But because of technology and COVID throwing us into Zoom, we've been able to accomplish a lot of things. So on the next slide, it's just basically talking about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the past. We're going to talk about the present, and we are going to talk about the future. Zeke is calling me on the phone. Did he get kicked out of the meeting maybe?
Let me see.
Bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and answer him real quick and see what's going on. Okay. And he's not there. So I'll just keep going.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay.
We'll see if he gets back on. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully he can get back in, but, and if he does, we're just going to tell him that we left the rest of it for him. So I covered my parts and we'll just let him handle the rest. So hopefully he'll get back on soon. So COVID, it changed things early this year. We started working from home, less in-person meetings. We didn't go to DC in May. I miss my Realtor family. But then there were other things that started happening in 2020. Ahmaud Arbery's killing, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. The injustices that we saw brought, Zeke just texted, he says he lost power. He will be back momentarily. So when we witnessed George Floyd being murdered on video, it stirred something in the soul of America. We couldn't wrap our heads around how could that even happen? And so it started conversations about things that we had always were scared to talk about. I read a book called White Fragility. And the premise of that book, it talks about how as a white person, it's really hard to talk about racism because we have a guilt complex associated with that. We feel bad. We aren't sure what to say. We are afraid to say the wrong things. And so we'll talk today a little bit about the policies that led to the segregated housing that we still have in America today. We'll talk about some of the changes and the things that have transpired in 2020 to start moving some of these policies and things forward. And then we'll talk about what's next. What can we do to continue moving fair housing forward in the future? So we will go on to the next slide and we'll see if Zeke is back with us. And he's not, so I'm just going to keep going. So this slide, we talk a little bit about the history and the past. So the map on the right is actually Philadelphia. And so you can see the areas that were redlined. In 1934, the Federal Housing Administration was created to ensure mortgages so that people coming back and veterans, people could get a mortgage, and it was federally insured. The only problem was, and at the time it wasn't a problem, in fact, realtors supported this decision, was these loans were only secured for white neighborhoods. And so the maps, they actually drew red lines around minority areas on the map, and they would not loan in these areas. The effects of that are still felt today. I would venture to say if you look at the map and you look at this map from back in the 1930s and you look at a map today, you're probably going to see some similarities still. And so while redlining is completely illegal, and it was made illegal in 1968 by the Fair Housing Act, it didn't change the neighborhoods that were already there. People were not comfortable. The Realtor organization did not support the Fair Housing Act at the time. The Realtor organization, it was a violation of the Code of Ethics to integrate a neighborhood. So these are things that, you know, we don't often think about because it didn't happen in my lifetime. It didn't happen to me, and it hasn't impacted me either. But when you look at the race of minority home ownership and things, you'll see as we move forward through the presentation that these federal policies greatly impacted our communities and what we have in our communities today. Somebody just hopped in. Was that Zeke maybe?
Yes, letting him in right now. Thanks.
All right, fabulous. So I will go ahead and just keep on moving forward, and we will let him pick up once he gets back in and settled. I do want to let everybody know, if you have a question, if you want to unmute yourself, I think as long as we can handle the volume of questions that are coming and we can have a respectful conversation, I would love for you all to ask questions. Feel free to participate. It'll be a lot more engaging because otherwise you're going to hear me and Zeke talking.
Michelle?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, it's Darlene. If it's okay for me to jump in, just to add a little more to that, I also belong to the Philadelphia Metropolitan Board of Realtors, and we're the local chapter of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. And it kind of fits in here. This organization was formed back in 1947 because back in those days, they would not allow African Americans to be realtors. So today I am a realtist, but also a realtor. So just to give some history to what you were talking about there.
Absolutely. And that's a legacy that our organization, while it may not be the people that are currently involved in membership now, that's the legacy of our organization. And so I think that we have a responsibility to make sure that we are serving all communities equally, and that because of the participation of our organization in the past in establishing these policies that created the segregation that we see in our neighborhoods, I think we have a moral obligation to continue these conversations, keep them at the forefront, and do everything we can as professionals to ensure that fair housing really is for everybody, and our organization is as well. Recent history. Last year, 2019, Newsday did a scathing expose on, it was called Long Island Divided. And what they showed was through paired testing that they exposed widespread racial discrimination by realtors. And so that propelled the national associations to start taking some action. Zeke, did you have anything you wanted to add about the history with FHA, Fair Housing, or Newsday, and how that's impacting things?
Well, first, I apologize. I lost power on my end, so apologize for that. But what I wanted to say is when we talk about FHA and when it was created and how it impacted, what is really the truth? The truth is that the reason that we all want to be homeowners is to build generational wealth, and that part has been that's been stymied throughout throughout my lifetime and much further before that. But with redlining, and we now say, well, redlining no longer exists, but it does. It exists in another format, and that is happening today through value and value in terms of our appraised values are not coming in as high when the individual is of color. So that's something for us to continue to be on the outlook for, and know that if you look at in 1968, our we were as homeowners, we were less than, we were basically less than 38%. And here we are in 2020, and we are just at 41%. So it's an issue that it continues to be a distraction, as well as it causes us not to be able to meet those dreams.
All right, so Zeke, I see a question in the chat that if you want to go ahead and answer, what is the difference between a realtor and a realtist?
Well, a realtor is, as we all know, is someone who is associated with the National Association of Realtors. And we basically have a three-way agreement between basically local, state, and national for all realtors to belong to. And we subscribe to what we call a code of ethics. Now, Realtors is an organization that was created, as Darlene said earlier, it was created in the 40s because we, as African Americans, could not belong to the Realtor organization. And so as a result, in order for us to be able to service our communities, we had to create what we call the Realtors organization. And the Realtors organization is known as the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. And it is under the guise of democracy and housing is what we're trying to achieve there. I subscribe to both, and I think that we need to work together. And it's important. One, as we celebrated the 50th anniversary of fair housing, and NAR highlighted the efforts of the Realtors community. So I just want everybody to also be proud that we as a Realtor organization has begun to listen, and that's really that's where you start.
Absolutely. If you guys want to go on to the next slide, and I think we had a question from Thomas O'Shell. Thomas, if you wanted to go ahead and ask your question before we move on.
Sure. Just trying to figure out where the mute button was. So the map that you had up in the last slide, and you said that would be available to us, and you said, can you compare it? You can compare it to today's maps, but in that comparison, I guess, can you look, are you able to see the long range socioeconomic impacts of what FHA did in the 30s and probably even longer than that to today's map and what that long range impact has been? This is astounding, actually, to learn this, but just curious if anybody has done that overlay.
I don't know specifically for this Philadelphia map. I will highly recommend a book called The Color of Law. And The Color of Law explores how the government instituted these policies and segregation. And so the system that we know was government mandated and government led and realtor sponsored and realtor supported. So I would suggest maybe reading that book, and I would imagine there probably are maps that you can overlay.
Right.
Okay. What was the
Color of Law? The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein.
All right. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
And to add on to that, Thomas, one of the things that, yes, you can still see the effects of that. It's not so much in a map format. It is now based upon, as you look at values within different communities. So you'll be able to see, you'll be able to see where values are lowered or, that are not where they should be. If you compare brick and mortar, and it's based upon the assets of the community.
Gotcha. Thank you, Zeke.
And they're going to share the presentation with you guys, and there are links. So most of the places where the words are underlined, there's links built into the presentation. So you can go and explore redlining and things like that. So on this slide, this is, to me, was the most powerful parts of the outcome of Long Island Divided, which was the Newsday story that came out last November. And what they established through their studies was that 19% of the time, Asian Americans were treated different when they went to purchase a home. 39% of the time, Hispanics were treated differently. And I think even more alarming, 49% of the time, Black people wanting to purchase a home were not treated the same. And, it was eye-opening for me because I consider myself somebody that's very educated on these issues and things. And as I watched the documentary that comes with that article, I thought, oh my goodness, we've always referred to schools. People want to live in a certain neighborhood because of the schools. And that article opened my eyes to show me that, it's somewhat of a code word for race in a community, because the education is directly tied to the property values. And your lower income or your lower property value areas tend to have a larger minority population. And so by telling people, the schools aren't so good there, you're also saying some other things about that neighborhood potentially without even realizing it. It talked about steering. That was a significant thing. Zeke, do you want to talk about steering and how that also has impacted what we're seeing in today's communities?
Right. Well, part of that, when we talk about things like that, a lot of times we think that as realtors, that when we are servicing someone, that we are doing the right thing by, one, if we see someone that's Asian and we suggest that they should go, there's some Asian communities here, or if we know that someone's Hispanic, that we can point them in the direction of those different communities. Now, what the real issue there is that we do some unintended consequences that are as a result of doing that. And so what we need to do is make sure that we do a needs analysis of all the people that we serve. And part of that is learning and understanding culture. What are people looking for? Why do they want to work with you? And the importance of, in order to be a good servicer of your client, you need to actually understand their needs. If we don't understand those, then we then try to make those choices for them. And so to get away from steering, the way to get away from that is to ensure that we understand exactly what the needs of each individual is. And so one of the things that the Long Island study did is it showed that here we are, we're in the year 2019, which is when this was completed, we are still at a point where we're steering folks, we're making decisions, or we are putting them in situations that are uncomfortable. And part of the only way that that changes is that we have to ourselves understand the importance of learning how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable in situations. And the way you are that is you have to have sometimes what we call fierce conversations, or you have to have, and some of those happen with yourself. Once you know what your issues are, then if we work around and work with people that don't look like us, it helps us to be better able to service them. So that's what I would put under, behind this. The other plug that I would make for this is that if you look at our history in terms of NAR, in the 60s, we were on the side in 1968 of the, basically of the Fair Housing Law. And so here we are today, and we are, we're 52 years beyond that, and we are still having those struggles. But what is great about what's happening today is that we have leadership at NAR in both our staff and in our volunteer leadership that understand that and are speaking to those issues. And going forward, that is going to be something that is very important. If you look at, before this came out, Brian Green was already hired. And in addition to that, things that came out of this is that we're going to stand for what is right and not no longer just say that it's not our business or whatever. So that's really what I think is the lesson for today is that we need to all understand that it still exists. And the most important thing I think is that inclusion, which is what this really is about. Inclusion is good business. And for us to say that we don't understand it, or we have seen it and choose not to talk about it because we don't want to get involved. If we're complicit, then we are actually condoning it. And neither of those are good things. So just want us to face it and then move on.
All right, next slide.
There is a question in the chat. I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
It says the Long Island case, were they treated different by the mortgage companies or by the realtors?
That particular study was only the realtors. So I'm sure there's probably studies out there. I don't know, it was Zeke, you might know what year it was that the federal government actually sued, I think it was Wells Fargo. In 2008, when the foreclosure crisis started, what they realized was that minorities had been getting the short end of the stick when it came to the mortgages. They had higher interest rates. They were being forced to put more money down. Things like that. Do you know much about that? I know it was a big federal lawsuit.
Well, I mean, you look at that and you also look at the issue of FHA, and we're being steered to that when that may not be the best possible solution for that customer. And so, because with FHA comes additional cost. And so we just have been traditionally in situations where costs are higher. And in addition to that, the loan value is lower. And when the loan value is lower, you are also paying higher percentages. And so all of that goes around one thing, and that's value. And so that's how it's been systematically, we've been disenfranchised.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's neighborhoods where it's virtually impossible to even get a mortgage because they don't want a loan on less than $50,000. Right. Or the properties are not going to appraise for what they're selling for. And so those neighborhoods are going to continue being owned by investors. Lack of home ownership is going to continue hurting those communities. So what we see from the policies of the past, in 2019, NAR did a snapshot of race and home buying in America. When you get this slide, you can go ahead and click on the title on this one, and it will take you right to that report so that you can see it. The data is based on 2016 through 2019. Home ownership rate for non-Hispanic white Americans was above 71%. Asian Americans, more than 53%. Hispanic Americans owned at about 45%, and Black Americans were only at 41%. So a full 30 points less. So what this shows us is that as realtors and as a nation, we have a lot of work to do so that these numbers can start to look, we can start, shrinking that gap. That gap can start to get smaller. It's absolutely critical. And the thing is that our policies and practices are what led to these numbers. These aren't just because Black people don't want to own homes, or they're not interested in purchasing, or they're afraid of a mortgage. The systemic things that our nation has gone through and had in place is what has led to this disparity. So I think that it's absolutely important to remember that when you look at the reports, these things didn't just accidentally happen. They were very strategic and at the highest levels. All right, next slide. So this one, Zeke, if you want to talk a little bit about, I know the numbers aren't super clear, but it's more the trends on this one.
Right. Well, what this really just talks about is if it is it's just, it shows home ownership rates by time, and it's really just a different illustration of what you just talked about. Whereas white home ownership is 72.2%, home ownership for all is 69%. The home ownership for Asian Americans is 59%, Hispanic 47.5%, and for African American, we are at 41.7%. So we continue to be on the lower rung in terms of home ownership, which means that we are also on the lower rung in terms of, if you, in addition, if you look at the average, let's take a Black college grad versus a white non-college grad, they have higher earning potential than the college graduate. And so, and there's no secret as that with that, white home ownership produces about 13 times the value that Black home ownership produces in terms of wealth. And so that is when we are looking at how we do things in life, we are all about trying to provide for our families and provide for our families' future. And you can't do that if you don't have the means to do so. And if you look at that from 2008, when most communities lost, they lost values. I'll take Chicago as that's where I'm from. The Chicagoland community lost about 20% overall, but the communities of color, more so the Black and brown communities, lost 60% in value. And so those homeowners who have been proud homeowners for years no longer had the ability to send their kids to college. And in a lot of cases, they lost their homes, and with that, they lost their future. And so, and what it has done today is it makes their children uncertain about home ownership because they've seen what their parents have gone through, and they don't want to do that. So we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me on this particular slide where you can see right around 2008, the African American homeownership rate really starts to decline. The all line declines a little bit, but not near as much as what you see in the African-American communities. And so I just think that that's critically important to remember. All right, and we will move on to the next slide, which is a quick little video to explain implicit bias. So we've talked about all these things, and we've talked about the systemic issues that have created this. The thing is the biases that we all have are accidental. They're unconscious. We don't even realize we're doing it. And once you start to educate yourself about it and you start to learn and understand those biases, then you can start to make a difference. And just by some of the questions that were asked today, you know, we can see people are interested. We don't know what we don't know. And so we all, every one of us, no matter white, black, brown, gay, straight, trans, it doesn't matter. We all have implicit biases. It's just a natural who we are, humanity. So we'll go ahead and play this video. It's just a couple minutes and it uses peanut butter and jelly to explain implicit bias.
Absolutely. Just let me know if you cannot hear it. It means I don't have something turned on. And I'll quickly turn it on.
Yeah, we can't hear it.
Can't hear it. Okay,
Thanks.
great. I'm gonna stop sharing. Don't panic. I'm gonna stop sharing, do my little change, and then I'll turn it right back on, everybody. I'm gonna take myself off camera just so I don't feel the pressure of you all staring at me. Please forgive me.
You're fine.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Sure.
Yeah, so, you know, we have with Zoom, you know, you just got to roll with the punches and go with the flow and give each other a little grace. I heard something on a session I was on a few weeks ago that just made me smile, and it was PTZD, post-traumatic Zoom disorder. You know, I mean, you hear these stories of people, you know, standing up and forgetting they didn't have pants on, and, you know, it's PTZD. People have it. It's a real thing now. So, yeah, you just roll with the punches. So hopefully we'll be able to hear this.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit bias in the debates, our phones started blowing up, all our friends started emailing us about it.
But what is implicit bias?
Okay.
Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes those shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, you know, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm gonna say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there's an over-representation of Black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that Black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race and exploring ways we might combat the problem.
One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's the scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
All right, so we can just go on to the next slide.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit.
All right. So I love the peanut butter and jelly analogy because it's so easy to get, you know, I mean, somebody says peanut butter, you think peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, that's just the natural tendency based on how often when you hear peanut butter, you're expecting a peanut butter jelly sandwich. So, you know, those are the sorts of things that it's unconscious. We don't intentionally do it, but it's a part of who we all are, every one of us. So I love that illustration of the peanut butter and jelly to explain the implicit bias. So now that we've given you guys a little bit of an overview, a little bit of history, and you're going, oh my goodness, okay, so we've been here, we have these systemic issues. The Realtor organization, we're seeing these things, we understand these implicit biases, but now what do we do? What is the Realtor organization doing to start overcoming some of these challenges? So this quote at the top of this slide, and I'm gonna turn it back over to Zeke, is, I don't know where Zeke got it from, but I'm sure he heard it somewhere. I would love to credit it to you, Zeke. So if this isn't original, you please tell me, because I keep telling everybody that Zeke Morris says, when you know better, you do better. And he said that, and it just really, really struck me, because as all of these things were happening and I was reading and learning and white fragility and the color of law, as you learn more about these issues, you understand and you want to do better. You want to be involved. You want to participate and be a part of the solution. We don't know exactly what that solution is or what does that look like, but it looks like lots of little steps. So Zeke, do you want to talk about some of these? These are actually big steps, what we're doing.
Well, the first thing I have to give credit to Grandma. Those are, you grow up, growing up in the Black family, there's always sayings, and that was one of the sayings. When you know better, you do better. So next time, make sure you don't do that again. So I'm
going to give credit to Zeke's grandma next time.
So, one of the things I want to touch on before I get to where NAR is today. Whoops. Is that tell us we're out of time?
No. No.
Okay. All right. I want to bring your attention to, I don't know how many of us were part of the leadership camp that just, that we just had. Well, during that, there was a conversation from Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. of Princeton. One of the things that he talked about, he made a very profound statement, is that NAR is a large organization and has the ability to implement change beyond its thought. And so you can choose, we as an organization can choose to make that change, or we can also choose not to make any change. And so I want to say to you unequivocally that we stand on the side of saying we're ready to make change. And that, as all of that began with, I believe it began probably 2.5 years ago, and you see the evolution of where we are today. And part of that is the hiring of Byron Green and knowing that we have to do something about inclusion and diversity. Looking at our Fair Housing Action Plan, which we call ACT, which is accountability, culture change, and training, is really basically what we're saying there is that we have to accept where we are. We're not perfect, and we have biases. We have things that we haven't done well. And okay, we got to admit that. And we've done that with an apology. In some cases, we've done a lot of different things. And so we just want to move forward in how we operate. And so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but by, looking at that, I want folks to be aware that we're in the midst of change. We're in the midst of change. And I think it's positive I'm proud to be a realtor today, because of how we stand. For the first time in a long time, I can say that we stand on the side of doing what's right, and we are not ashamed to do that. So, and we have other things that are in place, like the bias override and the Fairhaven Realtor, which is a simulation training that you can go through. But there are all kinds of things that are out here for you, and I encourage folks to utilize those.
Absolutely. So we lost our slide, which was our guide, but I got it pulled up on my handy dandy phone, so we'll be able to keep going right along without them. So Zeke just talked about ACT, which is the Accountability, Culture Change, and Training. That came from the news. There we go. There's our slide. ACT was a plan that came out of the National Association of Realtors leadership team within, it was almost days, I think, of the Newsday article being released. You know, I mean, what an embarrassment to our industry. And so our leadership immediately came out, got in front of it and said, no more, we're not going to do this. And so there's been definitely a focus. The first training thing that came out was the implicit bias. That's the bias override video. That is a much deeper understanding of implicit bias. I will also tell you, if you just Google Harvard implicit bias, you can actually take tests to judge your level of implicit bias on different races, different classes of people, all sorts of different things. You can see where you actually have biases. So that's sort of fascinating to do. That's if you just Google Harvard implicit biases. And then the bias override video. Fairhaven is an online simulation. Go to fairhaven.realtor. You'll just log in with your NAR credentials, and you will actually go through the process of being an agent and experiencing discrimination, as well as being a buyer and going through that process and what that feels like when you realize, oh my goodness, I was just discriminated against because of who I was. The next slide is probably the biggest changes that have come out of the awakening of 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. The Atlanta Association of Realtors reached out and said, NAR, we need your help. There were realtors saying things on social media and in the communities that were horrific, to be completely honest. There isn't any nice way to put it. It was disgusting. And so out of the conversations with the Diversity Committee, Strategic Thinking Committee, the Professional Standards Committee, came a new standard of practice and a revised definition of public trust, as well as changing when the Code of Ethics applies. So in the past, the Code of Ethics applied to a realtor's real estate related activities and transactions. And so what we discovered was that a lot of the hate speech and the things that were being put out weren't necessarily transactional or real estate related. It was more just blatantly racist statements or a hate speech. And so one of the changes that happened was that now realtors are bound by the Code of Ethics in their activities, period. So it isn't like, you know, Matt DeFana said it best, you can't be a realtor by day and a keyboard bigot by night. You could before, no longer. No longer is that going to be acceptable to be a member of our organization and behave in such a way. So standard of practice 10-5, realtors must not use harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Keep in mind, there are 27 states in the US that do not have any protections for sexual orientation or gender identity. Missouri is where I am in, is one of those states. So you can be fired from your job, you can be evicted from your home because your gender identity or sexual orientation in the state of Missouri. Public trust, now, if there is a complaint that is diversity-based or discriminatory, standard of practice 10-5, that is also going to be forwarded on to the appropriate housing authority. So in Missouri, that would be the Missouri Real Estate Commission. Pennsylvania, I'm sure it would be the Real Estate Commission there as well. If we go on to the next slide, some of the,
Michelle, I would like to
Yep.
just add on practice 10-5.
Yes.
It is from the perspective of how we operate as an organization, this is one of the most, the best change that we've made in terms of professional standards in over 30 years. And so I just want to, I want to make sure that people understand that this is huge. 10-5 is huge because it says that we as realtors say no more. No more. And regardless to however it comes across, whether you are, whether you are doing it in a fashion of, you think it's under the guise of you're not in a transaction, you have an opportunity now to know that there's accountability that goes with this. And so it's huge. It's just huge.
Completely agree. Let's see, I was just looking in the comments. Okay, so we're good there. All right, so if we go on to the next slide, part of what NAR was able to do this year was the Realtor Party had access to demographic information. And so that was something that we had never really been able to look at before as far as an organization and say, okay, what does our membership look like compared to what do our communities look like? I'll tell you, in the community I'm in, the community that I live in, my local board is just over 2,000 people. We're a community that is about 90% white, non-Hispanic. My organization, the Realtor organization in my community, is 97% white. So there's definitely a gap there. So this is new information. I don't know if you guys have even seen. NAR also sent me Montgomery County. So I looked at it, looks like they're one of your neighbors. And so this is information as far as what does the Bucks County Association of Realtors, what do your demographics look like compared to what the demographics of Bucks County look like? And then same thing if you look at the state of Pennsylvania. Look at the differential between Pennsylvania, the number of Pennsylvania realtors versus your population versus the realtors. You've got a 13% differential in the number of realtors versus the number of minorities in the population. So that's a pretty big difference. And so when we want to increase home ownership, we want to make sure that we are inviting everybody into our profession. Does anybody have any question? I mean, this is a lot to digest here to just kind of look at and compare these numbers. Again, you'll get this information.
Yes, I don't understand really well what you're saying. So these two graphics, the first one is showing ownership and the second one is showing the percentage of realtors who are white.
So the first one is your membership. So the first set of numbers up at the top, 93% of your members at the Bucks County Association of Realtors are white, non-Hispanic white, versus 87% of the population in Bucks County is considered non-Hispanic white. So not as big of a differential as in the whole state of Pennsylvania, or for example, my local association. And then Montgomery County, it's about the same difference. But if you look at the other populations, it's a little bit different. So Montgomery County has a larger percentage of Black realtors than Bucks County. So it's just a different way to look at the numbers and see, who are our members? Who are our members? Who are the realtors out there? And what we're seeing is that we don't have enough minority realtors. And that may also be impacting the homeownership rates and the homeownership numbers and things like that. So again, this is fairly new information.
I'm Hispanic, and I was like never, I think I never pay attention. I mean, I have a neighbor who flies these Confederate flags, and they never bothered me because I didn't grow up here. I mean, I'm not offended because I was not related. I mean, now I am. But there is a lot of things that I do believe that we don't perceive. Even the school district and the school, there is just what Black families in our school district. So really, we don't have diversity And I was not really aware of all this problematic until like 3 years ago. I have the first client who came to the office and asked me, if you don't help me, nobody will help me. And it opened my eyes. Like, I can't believe this is going on.
Well,
Yeah,
It's
I think
shocking.
Yes.
what Gabriel's saying, it is shocking, and people can't believe even today with some African-American realtors, even my, just to share a event, my sister-in-law became a realtor, and the condo that she was selling wasn't getting as much traffic. And someone in the neighborhood mentioned to the owner, it was because their realtor was Black. And so she felt bad. She wanted to sell the condo, and she finally got to the point where, hey, if it doesn't sell in another couple of weeks, maybe we should consider giving you a different agent. But it was wonderful. The owner said, no, you're our agent. We're going with you, and we're not listening to that. So it's still happening today. Maybe not as prevalent, but it does happen in certain areas. And just looking at the comparison with the Pennsylvania breakdown of population, you see that 80% in Pennsylvania are white, non-Hispanic, 11% are Black, 3.5% Asian, 4% Hispanic. And then when you look at the breakout of the realtors, you're kind of looking for something similar to the population breakout. And so I believe that's what Michelle is trying to compare here. You see that 93% of white non-Hispanics are realtors, 4% Black, whereas the population for Pennsylvania, 11% is Black. So there's a disparity there. We have some work that we can do with bringing other minority realtors in. You see with the Asian population of realtors, there's only 1%, but they make up 3.5% of the population. And
Yes.
then Hispanics is 1%, but they're 4% of the population. So where you see those numbers are lower, it just says that now we know better, we can do better, and try to bring more into the fold.
Absolutely. You know, it's just good to be able to look at and see, who are you? You know, what does your membership look like? So, and I think that just goes on to the last slide, and we're just a couple minutes over. Happy to entertain any questions. I know we were supposed to wrap up at noon, so I apologize for going over. But
Michelle, there is I'm sorry, Michelle. There is a comment from Marshall. I don't know if you want to read it. It's to everyone.
He says, no question, this was a stunning departure from NAR's past. It stirred up some pushback, so I think we all need to push against the resistance. This was an extraordinarily important stance by our association, and we should all be proud. Completely agree. Marshall, that is just spot on, right on where we're at. It was approved with overwhelming support. So this is, you know, this is who we are. Yep. This is who we are. We are moving forward. We are acknowledging the past, and let's put it in the past, but let's move forward and learn from the past.
And let us all be encouraged and empowered to do as we know what needs to be done. And so that, with that thought, I mean, I just believe that having moments like today is a great start. So I applaud you for doing that. And I think that knowing that there are resources out there for you, there's help. If there's something that you need help on, or you want to do more, I want you to be intentional about it and reach out to whoever you need to, and we're resources for you as well.
Well, I just want to thank both of you so much for taking the time to be with us today. It is such an important conversation, and it's just beginning. And as I said earlier, our diversity committee is committed to educating our members, and also in our brand new strategic plan, our diversity committee is charged with looking at the demographics of our membership as compared to the demographics of our county. And so we're going to be taking those steps to educate ourselves and our members, and also look at increasing the diversity among our leadership. So thank you so very much. And I want to thank our diversity chair, Rose Yuan, and also Darlene Meekins for stepping up and doing the hard work, the heavy lifting here. It wouldn't have happened without them. And I thank everyone for your time as well. So look for our email for the recording on this, and it's going to be out there on the web. And oh, I have one thing to say to Michelle. Go Navy. Right? Army-Navy game is this Saturday. Go Navy, beat Army.
Yes, absolutely.